So
There we go.
every time
There
I
we go.
feel
There we
like
go.
it's still a challenge, like irrespective of I've now done 3 4, and unless you have your own
Yeah.
professional studio setup, right? It's not like a easy thing to do. I thought it was like very seamless, like it's easy enough to do podcasts, and I realized um, even the editing, like all of that, it's nothing's like so easy as we hope it will be, and I hope at some point it does become easy, but
Yeah, it's
yeah,
mostly like lighting and sound, I think, that's the challenge. Um, but like,
like
welcome to
welcome
my
to my
ironing
ironing
board
board
because
because
it works
it
very
works very
well.
well. I hear an echo. 1 second when you are
Is it on
talking.
my
On
end
my end,
or
or
I
I
wonder,
wonder,
do you want
do
me
you
to
want me
close
to
out
drop off of
Google?
the other, like maybe on the meet, when you can you drop off of that meet?
Yeah, let me drop off.
I think it's from there.
There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's completely gone. Okay. And the few things I will think about, I think you had what happens in a world of infinite labor, infinite content, and mass personalization. The Andrew Chen's quote is like, I will remember that. Okay, so this time the one thing I'm gonna do differently is I wanna start with like your marketing philosophy, if you have one, or a
Mm-hmm.
favorite quote of yours, and then we'll start the interview if that's okay, because I wanna figure out, yeah, if that's a possibility, we can do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right,
Oh,
okay, okay. Let's kickstart with your just start with your marketing philosophy if you have one.
yeah. My marketing philosophy is pretty easily summed up by two words, and those two words are empathy and curiosity. At the end of the day, marketing is about building a product that's going to serve end users, getting that product into the hands of the right users. We're going to see the most value from it, and that comes down to a lot of empathy. And the other one is curiosity. I don't feel like you can be a good or even an excellent marketer without an immense curiosity for the space that you're working in, the problems that you're trying to solve for your customers and your customers themselves. What are their lives like? What are their pain points? What are they feeling? Just really being able to be curious and to dive into their lives with curiosity and empathy is, I think, uh, those are two of the big soft skills that I would say marketers need to have.
Amazing. So here we have Lindsay King, and she is an expert marketer with a very full cycle marketing, with brand marketing, content marketing, performance marketing, and she's worked on some of the industries that are the most red taped, from like medtech, fintech, and she's taken companies from PI, startup stage to IPO, and she is the bump. Like, so let's like delve in and talk to her. And Lindsay, like I have not met like too many marketers with this full cycle marketing, and I haven't met too many that are hardcore marketers lately either. A lot of people have been switching careers and get into marketing, but you are someone that has like marketing and like right from the beginning. So can you tell me a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, as you said, I'm a pretty hardcore marketer. I absolutely love what I do. I love being a marketer. I love interacting with marketers. I love what we do for businesses. Really passionate about that. Um, so a little bit about my background, a bit atypical. I don't have an MBA. I wasn't formally trained in marketing. I also, just adding to a little bit of my marketing philosophy, I think that marketing is something you learn better on the job than you maybe do in school. The reason for that is it's great to be equipped with theory, and you definitely need some of that theory, but I feel like you learn that in its application in the field. So I feel like you're better getting your hands in the machine there, getting dirty, getting scrappy. Um, so I have a humanities background. I nearly did a PhD in French literature, which is another
Wow.
story for another time. But I do think that background in the humanities gave me the tooling to know how to ask the right questions without absolutely having the right answer. Um, Marketing is not often about having a right or a wrong answer. It's also a lot about having a hypothesis and testing what your hypothesis is. I left academia in my early 20s in order to find a career that would let me be both creative and interact with human beings, because
Mm-hmm,
research,
mm-hmm.
you're often in a library, which can be a little isolating. And I found my way into marketing at first in advertising agencies, and then moved in-house to the client side of work. I joined Uber in France in 2017, spent about 2.5 years at that company,
Mm-hmm.
and then have been in startups ever since. So I've done every series, as you mentioned, from B through to IPO,
Yeah.
done a lot of different industries. I've done ride tech, prop tech, med tech, fintech. If it's got tech in the name, I've basically done it. Um, and I am now just experimenting with earlier stages. I'm actually doing some consulting work for more pre-seed seed companies that are looking to get to a Series A and beyond. So it's interesting to dive into that earlier space as well.
Great and amazing. And the question that we will delve into a little bit is, since you have that expertise with both European and US companies, as well as like a medtech and fintech companies, I want to delve into this question of how is marketing different when GDPR came into play? When um, CCPA in California is still not as stringent as GDPR. As long as
Mm.
you're following some basic compliances, you're good. But GDPR is much more stricter, and I think you are delving with all of these companies that have more compliances around HIPAA, around SOC. Like there are so many things, and how is marketing changing, or what do you think is the perspective like without those and with those, and what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously somewhat of a cultural difference between Europe and the States when it comes to regulatory. Europe, obviously, it's sort of the cliche is that it's much more stringent on regulatory. And obviously, when GDPR came into place, there were a lot of things that marketing organizations and companies in general had to do in order to make sure that they were marketing properly. To be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I don't know that I felt like a huge impact from that, because I felt like we were so well taken care of by our legal teams. I think if anything, it just reinforced the need that, and I often say this to my direct reports, is make legal your best friend. Like really, even marketers, if you can get into the brain of your attorney or your legal team and just
Mm-hmm.
understand that at the end of the day, what they want is for you to not burn down the business.
Yeah.
If you can find a working relationship with them, it gets a lot easier. I think where it might have changed things a bit was more on just user consent.
Mm-hmm.
Having a lot of, for example, in banking, you have two-factor authentication if you're going to like make a payment. Um, for data and privacy, we had to send out a lot of CRM emails just to say, okay, well, if you if you use our product, essentially you're opting into these conditions, and this is how you contact us to remove your personal data from our listservs. What's funny though, I find is it's so normalized for European companies and European marketers, so to speak, that
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes I've heard that in San Francisco in particular, if you come from that regulatory context, can actually be an advantage, because we look at things like HIPAA and we're just like, oh, that's kind of easy actually. Like regulatory for us is just so common that we don't see it as a challenge. I would say is more of a feature of the business.
And do you have challenges with personalization in that scenario? I think here, especially, less so even in US, but Asia, for example. I come from Asia, and one of the things like there's personalization sometimes goes to creepiness levels there, and it's because everyone knows. There's like a lot of information shared. It's a little bit less so here,
Mm.
but there is advantage and disadvantage to that, and there is so how personalized can you make your marketing to be, and I would love to understand how you tackle that problem.
Yeah, it's funny that you bring up the creepiness up, because the one golden rule we had when I was working at Uber, and particularly with like the CRM team, is we would always like craft communications and we'd be asking ourselves, would this come across as creepy or not? We sort of had this unspoken rule that if we were to receive it and we were to feel like it was creepy, we wouldn't send it, right?
Oh,
So I think
right.
there's a little bit of common sense to it. And I also think there's just technical capability, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You and I have talked a little bit about like targeting, for example, and
Yeah, yeah.
personalization through digital advertising and marketing. And, we're even limited today a little bit by the quality of how we can personalize,
Yeah.
because the data actually isn't clean. Like we know that there's a lot of bots in contributing to like third party data. So it can't always be trusted. There's a bit of a quality issue there. So I think there's two things going on. I think there's one, can you do it technically? And two, from a human perspective, should you? Like it's not because you can that you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know that the promise of personalization has fully played out yet. I'd like to see how it develops over the next couple of years with AI and that kind of capability.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite convinced we've nailed it yet, so to speak.
Got it. And do you kind of, since you said personalization shouldn't be creepy, do you think about it at the level of at least tackling it maybe at segments level, or is that like a type of personalization that is by that what I mean is it might not be like you know everything about that person, but if you segment them a certain by interests or by like profession or anything like that, you see that working out really well in terms of um, how you, especially in the spaces of medtech and fintech.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for, I mean, I think the segmentation that you're making me think of is psychographic segmentation. So psychographic segmentation is just kind of understanding the attitudes of like subsets of customers. And we did that a lot at Uber and particularly in the EMEA when I was
Yeah.
there. And so we knew we had specific segments of like, they saw rideshare as being part of status. So for them, like being able to order an Uber like Black was like part of their status.
Yeah.
There were other segments we knew where it was like we called them coin careful. It was like they were willing to use rideshare, but only in specific contexts and for specific reasons. So it's a little bit about knowing attitudinally like how your consumers are sort of grouped. And that can be very, very helpful because it gives you a little bit more of a personalized feeling, I think, without getting super granular. I feel like it gets creepy when you get granular to the point where you're like, we know that you went from this street to this street at 12 p.m. last night, right? Then you get that big brother effect. But you see this all the time. There's companies like Spotify that like do a year in review where they sort of give you the data on, you know, you listen most to this genre, or this is the song you listen most to this year. That is a realm and a product in which that feels less creepy because it's sort of lighthearted, right?
Yeah.
But if you were to do it with medical, if you were to have like a medical platform that said, we know that you went to the dentist like 12 times and you got 10 cavities filled, that's going to feel really creepy. So I think it comes down to that human discernment of to what level of granularity are you going to get that it's creepy or not creepy? And does it make sense for your industry and product? So I think there's just a little bit more nuance to bring to that conversation.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've seen the end of personalization, but I think we need to be more intentional about it as well.
Yeah. And you actually weave in really well. Like you talked about, we began the conversation with like empathy, curiosity, and all of that. That also fits in where the goal here is end of the day we are serving our customers, but we have to understand the cultural nuances where the way you said black car is a status symbol as opposed to and that's the nuances in every country, every city, every like scenario. And the more you can embed that, like, and you still make them feel personal but at this level of not making them creepy. You could say, hey, there is a research that came out about people that go to the doctor so many times is to check up, like can get so many diseases preventable, and that is not creepy. But at the same time, if you say you've been to doctor so many times, it might be creepy. So it's a balance, it's a delicate balance, and at the same time it's that curiosity and like empathy required for the customer, be in their shoes, and then try to like tackle marketing. It's very subtle art, and that's where I think I love about marketing, which is there's so many nuances to understand. It's platform nuances, it's cultural nuances, it's customer nuances, and then going after like more things like that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, like if we go back to those examples we just talked about, like Spotify, it's really fun to share like your year in review with friends. So what do? You post it on social media. It becomes like this viral shared moment. We all look forward to that like end of year review because we know, oh, Spotify's going to release something that's, you know, they've changed the experience this year, and that becomes fun. And I think they have a product that allows them to do that. Whereas I'm not quite convinced you can do it with like, you know, medical business.
Medical, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or finances. You can say you filed bankruptcy, or you can say you bought like this house, so do something more. And yeah, so there is a certain
Yeah.
balance. So now I'm gonna switch gears a little bit, and we talked about this a lot, which is and my favorite topic now, which is the Silicon Valley's taste. So in the age of AI and tech becoming it's everywhere, and AI is making so many things possible, and finding those differentiators for technology is becoming harder and harder, and you have to work at it. And unless you have very subjective products, there's a little bit less of a moat. So you had mentioned taste is become a big thing, and can you talk a little bit about what this taste is, what it means, and how can brands make this their differentiators?
Yeah. Um, Interestingly enough, I mean, this kind of ties back to something that you and I were talking about a bit earlier, which is um, commoditization. So AI has sped up the development process for things like software, and it makes it so that there is a proliferation of competitors in any given space to an extent that maybe there wasn't before. And what that does, in my mind, is it puts pressure to find other ways of differentiating because your product itself might not actually be super differentiated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so then you have to think about, well, I've got my left brain solution over here, but how do I appeal to that very human right brain side of things? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where taste comes in. So taste, if we try to define it, and at least my understanding of it, is that taste is all of the choices that you will make as a company and as a brand about how you want your product to look, feel, and appeal to your customer base. How do you want them to feel when they're opening that welcome screen? Do you want it to be joy, relief, delight? What are you aiming for? And I think because of the commoditization of software and products, you have to turn to that more as a differentiator, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
turn to it much faster and much earlier than maybe we've seen in previous technology cycles. So there's a brilliant article that we can share with folks. We'll send the link out about the rise of taste in Silicon Valley, and I've actually witnessed it firsthand. I'm working in the medtech space right now for a client, and we were benchmarking lots of different medtech sites. So we were looking at things like Levels, which came out of ODF. We were looking at Maven Clinic. We were looking at Marley Medicine, just to name a few. And what you'll notice is like the design choices, the taste choices are very, very different for all of those
Yeah.
those products and services because they're trying to appeal to a very specific audience, and they're trying to differentiate on that. So
Yeah.
I think what delights me actually, and I love this, is that there's so much more of a focus on that now than there was maybe 10 years ago when I started working in tech. And I just love it because I feel like that's actually the humanizing element of these products and services. Like we're finally starting to see more of that softer, qualitative, like left brain
Yeah.
point, which is my first love.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's interesting to see that.
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is, so products where they're just like products, just something serving a solution is like one way of doing
Mm-hmm.
it. When you say like this taste, or it's essentially branding, it's essentially marketing, that you make it to be a differentiator. It's about how you tell the story, what quality do you give it, what colors do you give it, what is like the story you're trying to tell about the customer, and how they can leverage the use cases you build on top of it. And all of these elements are what are making it stand out, and that's become so much more important. And this is the first time it's marketing is getting its importance as well. I feel like so far it's always been like a cost center, and the more you look at it as like a less of a cost center and more of a value add, like that's where you're
Mm.
going after, right? Like so and the question we have for you is essentially, if you don't want to think about marketing as a cost center but also have this taste element, what are like 5 or 6 things that the customers can do to start to embed this into their startups?
Yeah, so just to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, what we're talking about is the fact that traditionally in most companies, marketing is really seen as a cost center. It's a spot in your financial projections where your
Exactly.
CFO, you're often sinking, you're seen as sinking a lot of money into it in order to get it going. Um, And I think that that is absolutely the wrong approach. I'll just start by saying I think it's the wrong approach because the real role of marketing is actually to take $1 of investment and turn it into five of revenue.
Yeah.
And the way that you do that is by building a machine that's going to really get efficient at driving acquisition, engagement, and retention in
Mm-hmm.
ways that drive the P&L upward, in ways that expand growth, in ways that make it so that you're seeing more revenue off one customer. Um, and in terms of taste, if we come back to this idea that taste sort of sits on the branding side of things, I just want to point out that branding in particular, there's often this notion that a brand is its logo or that a
Mm-hmm.
brand is just the communications element. Um, that is absolutely also false because branding touches every part of the experience now. So it touches everything from customer service. So what is the impression or the perception that your customers have of you in interacting with your customer service, all the way through to, okay, well, what are the visual elements that make me different and make me stand out? It's the whole range. So brand marketers have turned into, hopefully, or they this is my approach to it, is they need to be orchestrators of an experience and not
Mm-hmm.
just stewards of colors, typography, logo, etc. So what are the things you can do as a startup founder, I think, to give yourself a solid foundation? I think the first is, do not underestimate the power of thinking about these taste choices and your brand from the very, very, very beginning. There's a brilliant book that I would recommend that founders read called, it came out a few years ago. It was written by a gal named Emily Hayward, who started an agency in New York because she came to this realization that there were a lot of startups in very similar spaces with very similar products. And the thing that separated the winning startups from some of the ones that didn't make it was this approach toward having a very clear story, having a very clear experience, knowing what you stand for. She uses the example of like Allbirds in the early days of Allbirds. Allbirds is obviously like a shoe company.
Yeah.
And Allbirds, when they started, they wanted to position themselves really firmly on like this sustainability niche. But what they realized quite quickly is if you talk only to people who are interested in sustainability and sustainable sneakers, it's not actually a big enough market.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was they pivoted the strategy to recognizing that there was a particular type of consumer that wanted a shoe that was stylish enough to wear to the office, like professional enough to wear to the office, but also comfy enough and urban enough and hip enough to
Yeah.
go run or explore. So
Yeah.
Allbirds became these like multi-purpose shoes to do that. And so this agency that Emily runs cracked the storytelling around that, cracked the positioning, and helped them really find that purpose that rocketed their sales forward. So that's just one example of one company that did it. But again, highly recommend reading that book if you're interested in starting to think about these things.
Yeah, love the Albert story. Definitely. Now I know. It's funny you said that, and a lot of like my friends that are doctors or in medical profession, they actually always have to be on their toes, but they need something
Mm-hmm.
stylish enough that they can like do all day. They all wear Alberts. Like it's become like their
Mm-hmm.
go-to because they
Yeah,
think it stands for sustainability, but at the same time, it's stylish enough and comfy enough that they can navigate through the day. And that's an impression. Like, there might be other shoes that are really good, but it's like that branding is what's created that value, right? And they can see
exactly.
themselves in their shoes. And definitely, I
Mm.
think for more such tips, there's things to look at, and we'll put more resources. But I also love Chip Conley's like What Makes You Stick, and that is another book like that. You think about what creates the stickiness, what creates like that idea for customers to take carry with the brand, and those are some of the stories I love as well. And
Mm-hmm.
just to pivot a little bit on the same topic, but you said marketing is, you shouldn't look at it as a cost center. You shouldn't look at it uh, as for the startups that are very initial phases, right? How should they think about marketing or position themselves, or should they have like an in-house marketing team, or should, because they don't have resources, what are the like
Mm.
very organic things that they can think about right in the beginning, because they are at a place where they might not have a great website, they might not yet have
Hmm.
the resources to do it, and this is a common challenge that I get asked for by my startup friends as well. Hey, can you quickly like do my content for the website, and how should they think about it?
Yeah, obviously, take what I said about marketing being cost center versus revenue center with a grain of salt. I think it applies a little bit more to startups that are starting to see revenue, have some good PMF, good traction. They've maybe brought on that CFO that's going to handle a lot of the P&L and L and help with projections. Doesn't make a lot of sense when you're pre-seed and you're maybe just trying to crack your PMF. I think one of the most underlooked things, and it doesn't come naturally to technical founders because they're just maybe not, they don't have as much exposure to it, is this idea of positioning. And positioning is really simple. It is basically understanding um, who you are for, like who is your product for versus who you are not for. And even very mature companies make this mistake. And the mistake they make is saying, we're for everyone. We can
Mm-hmm.
help everyone. We can sell to everyone. And granted, you can start niche and kind of scale to that as you get to maturity. But in order to find good traction, you often have to come out very clearly and say, if if you like really expensive luxury watches and you have the money to do it, we're for you. Our name is Rolex, right?
Mm.
Um, but if you don't clarify that, that makes it hard for the right people to find you and say, hey, they're for me. And so I think the ways this works in very early stage companies, we often talk about edge cases, right? And I think it's one of the smartest things you can do when you are trying to build something is think about, okay, what's the edge case I can work on and who is it for? And I think one of the most brilliant examples I've seen recently is there was a company that came out of YC24. It's their name is Lumona, and it is an AI powered contextual search engine. The edge case that they started with was actually skincare users. So they knew, okay, well, if you spend all of your time on social media trying to find the exact right skincare products, and this is a behavior a lot of women have and some men have as well, we're the search engine for you. And so they built on that edge case and they've been able to expand outward out of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's a one really easy tip I think you can think about early on to gain some of that organic traction is just knowing who you're for. And if you're early stage, like that can pivot a little bit, but it's good
Mm-hmm.
to know what you're building and who you're building for. And that is also just on the marketing end, we call it positioning.
Nice. So we have had so many good takeaways from this episode, and let me like see if I can summarize some of them, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So if you are in early stage company, the one thing you should think about is definitely clarify who your customer is and what you are giving them, and so that positioning of who you're doing it for is at least one thing you have to keep in mind. If you don't do anything else, don't think about colors, all of this, it's definitely think about like who you are serving and clarify it really well. So that's one. Then the more you become established, the more as you're maturing, the things that you should think about especially is giving your product a sense of taste or a character. You give it like that's what you do to make it stand out by either telling a brilliant story, by making like marketing. It's like Dollar Shave Club, right? And they have such a unique character that they give, and there are hundreds of shaving companies out there, like shaving brands out there, but the story they told, like then they actually gain loyal fans, and that's so use branding to your advantage. Never think of marketing
Mm-hmm.
as a cost center, think of it as revenue center. Might not be the case very initial companies or early on, you might need to still spend money where you're not getting revenue, but know that that is what's going to yield results eventually, and that's going to be your differentiator. And lastly, I think you have to definitely keep in mind this idea of empathy, and whenever you're doing personalization or segmentation, keep these elements in mind, but understand the nuances of platforms, cultures, customers, and see if you can fulfill their needs in very unique ways possible. And curiosity, which is end of the day, you don't know what will work like till you experiment with it. Have that curious mind, so you test, adapt, you actually experiment and all of that, for sure. So that's those are some of the key takeaways. We'll close it with, do you have any final any favorite quote of yours or anything that that like you love? I think we talked about a few things, but anything that you love that we want to leave with here?
Ooh, a quote. Can it be about like anything?
Yes, yeah,
Are
yeah,
we
you can.
broad
Yeah,
here?
yeah, yeah, you can
Or
go
ooh,
very broad.
let's see. I mean, this is sort of cliche, but shoot for the moon. Even if you miss, you'll land among the stars.
Nice.
And I think that that is all to say that, you miss 100% of the shots that you never take. So, and I know that'll resonate with a lot of people maybe listening in, but um, just admire so much founders that are on these journeys that are willing to be vulnerable to get in the arena and just like fight for what they want to build because not everyone has the guts to do that. So, um, cheering you on.
Thank you. I think for founders, that can totally be like an aspirational thing as well. And even for marketers, you aim for something, you aim to become Tesla, you aim to become the next big company, and you give it a shot. You try, you take risks, and you experiment and you learn from it. And you have to be agile and adapt to like new things as well. So that's what's gonna make you win. And that's just superb quotation to leave you with. Thank you, Lindsay, for this amazing show. I truly appreciate it. I think there were a lot of takeaways here, and I had fun learning so much from you. And I'm sure the viewers are learning as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to close it out, if anyone is looking for help with things like branding, marketing, messaging fit, are we saying the right thing to the right segment? Social media, organic content, feel free to reach out. I can be found on LinkedIn. So Lindsay, Lindsay, King, King. I will shoot my contact information over to Sura. So that way, if you want to get that, and we'll be sure to give you the links and references to sort of the material that we referenced here today.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. And yeah, look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Sudha.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. And this time it will be very fast because it's done. It's all like taken care of.